Force Multiplier is excited to have launched our community, a community designed for both leaders and Force Multipliers. This dynamic community is not only filled with a plethora of networking opportunities and exclusive events with distinguished guest speakers, but filled with value-added sources such as courses, on-demand training, templates, resources, publications, and so much more. Check it out, link below in the show notes. We are honored to host Brenda Rogers. She exemplifies the Force Multiplier role, taking her journey from executive assistant to chief of staff in prominent organizations, recently at the Gordon Ramsay Corp. Brenda shares how she built her career path, how she openly spoke about her aspirations and where she wanted to take herself, what it takes to be a Force Multiplier, along with tips and guides for leaders themselves. She has a humble spirit with a calming presence and an ambitious soul. I am sure you're going to love listening to her as much as we enjoyed hosting her. Brenda Rogers, thank you so much for joining the Founder and Force Multiplier podcast today. You to us are such a brand on target, I would say, for Founder and Force Multiplier, because your journey speaks to Force Multipliers. You are a Force Multiplier. You have an amazing story, and we are so excited to have you here. If you can take a moment to share with us who Brenda Rogers is, your journey, and sort of why I'm saying you're the target for a Force Multiplier and what we teach and preach.
Hi, Manal. It's so nice to be here. Thank you very much for asking me. I'm honored. If I can, I've always wanted to be a secretary, my entire life. I watched Perry Mason when I was a little girl. And I know, look it up. I wanted a secretary like Della Street. And she was, Perry Mason's right arm. And it was something I'd always wanted to do. So I've been, a secretary, an administrative assistant, an executive assistant for a million years. And I love it. I have a great passion for it. I like Della Street. I had always wanted to be that right arm for my manager, which I think is what makes assistants be that force multiplier that you all talk about. We're the boots on the ground for our manager, and I've always been that way with mine. I had worked with my last manager for about 13 years, and he kept me around for a reason. He wasn't just doing me a favor by letting me work with him. He needed me because I was good at what I did, and I did all that I could to make him successful and to protect him. So
that's awesome. So your journey, which I'd love for you to zone in on this part, going from an EA to a chief of staff, and you're also being very humble because you've been chief of staff to kind of prominent, I would say, executives, right? And EA. Kind of share that journey of what it took to go from an EA to a chief of staff, and what were some of the lessons, and if you were to go back and redo anything, is there anything that you would redo? And I feel like that would help so many out there that are also on that path, because it is a little, as you stated to me before, it's a little bit of an uncommon path, because in the past, chief of staffs maybe came from MBA programs or strategy roles, and then they moved into these chief of staff roles. But Brenda, you opened a different path, which, is amazing. And it is such, I feel like, also a natural path. So I'd love for you to talk about it and share that.
Well, as I mentioned before, I'd worked with my manager for a while. And when I became his executive assistant when he was CEO back at Macaroni Grill, that was my career goal. That is what I wanted to do. But after I had been in the role for a while, and I had worked for another executive in between this time, I just needed something more substantive. I wanted to have a role that was more meaty.
Right.
And I had started to, I'd always been, taking some type of training, but I had started to hear about the Chief of Staff role. And it sounded interesting to me. It sounded as if it was that meaty role that I was looking for. And so I kept looking at it, and I ended up talking to my manager about it when we were at Del Frisco's, and I can't remember the year. But anyway, I was talking to him about it and telling him this is what I want to do. He was very supportive in that, and suggested that I continue training and all of that. And so in between that time, I was then promoted to vice president of administration at Del Frisco. And so that helped me do more with, being more strategic, being a leader. I led two other administrative assistants or executive assistants. And then I joined a KPMG class for executive.
Oh,
So
nice.
I did that, and I was the only EA in the room amongst all the other vice presidents in there. And so that was fun, and I had to do presentations, so that put me out there, and I had to do public speaking, which I
Wow,
hate.
yeah.
And so I believe that helped me, put me on that path to being a chief of staff. And then when I moved over to Gordon Ramsay North America, that's when I became an actual chief of staff. It was a learning. It was a learning experience for me because we were starting brand new restaurants, opening new restaurants here in the U.S. And it was difficult. I won't lie, because then I had to take on and learn what the strategy and tactics were for our brand new company and make sure to keep all the leaders on track with that. I felt like in that role, I was a goalkeeper. I made sure that my manager stayed on track with, what it was that we were setting out to do. And he appreciated that, because, we'd kind of go along the way, and then I'd be like, but aren't we supposed to do this? So
Yes.
it was really good. Talking about my journey, the one thing that I think is very important that everybody should know is bring your manager in on your journey with you. If this is something that you want to do, tell him or her what it is that you want to do. They can be the ones to help you. When I told Norman, I want to do this, then he was like, well, I'm going to have you do the KPMG course. And they normally have that for, higher up or higher level executives than me. So I feel like you have to talk to your manager about what it is that you want to do, and ask for their help, whether it's your manager or someone else in your circle, in your professional circle, or someone else at your office. You have to ask for help, and you have to say it. You have to speak it. If you don't, then no one will ever know, and you may not get there. You may not.
Yeah. I love everything you just said. One, just to recap, the fact that you took your career stepping stone in your hand, laid out what you wanted, and created a path for it, that is so important. There's so many times we kind of get stuck in a rut. And I always tell anyone in that position, because it's not easy, when we're not feeling challenged and we're like, I don't know what my next goal is. I always say, give yourself a chance. Put an action plan together. It may not be the perfect action plan, and it may not work out, and you might have to pivot, but at least you're starting, right? And that's important.
It
And
is
the
important.
communication.
Mhm.
Communication, yes.
You have to, it all comes down to, saying what you want. You have to say what you want, and not be afraid to say that, and not to be afraid to ask. So, you stand up for yourself and do that. And that's even part of being a chief of staff, because you're going to have to say, you may have to say some things that may not be too easy,
Right.
may not be something that your leader wants to hear. So you have to project and put yourself out there. It'll be okay. You'll live.
I love it. So Brenda, tell us, I say this all the time, being any force multiplier, you really live in the gray. But I feel like as a EA, there's still a little more structure than being a chief of staff. And then when you're a chief of staff, you sort of are expanded and you are, a visionary. You're kind of helping, like you said, make sure that everybody's on track and sticking to the metrics and the KPIs and the goals that are going to get us to the ultimate vision for the company, right? Which is not easy to do. You're dealing with a lot of executives, the entire leadership team, cross-functional teams. Like, it's a pretty big undertaking. For you, and from your experience, what was the biggest difference from an EA to chief of staff, and how did you sort of help yourself get to that next level?
It's difficult. Well, actually, let me back up. I don't think it's too different from an EA, because I think of both of these roles as being highly exposed roles,
Right.
especially when being an EA to a CEO. So I think they're both highly exposed roles. Um, the one big difference I think there is with that is um, you tend to be you tend to learn more about what's going on with strategy and tactics. You probably learn a lot more than what you want to know, but you learn a lot more about that, and you have a say. EAs should have a say as well, but being a chief of staff, you're on the leadership team.
Right.
So you have a say and you have to say it. You can't sit there and go, oh, well, they're not going to listen to what I say, or what I say doesn't matter. What you say does matter. And if you see that there's some type of calamity ahead, or a possible say it. It may not
Right.
happen, but say it. You are coming from a place, especially if you're coming from an EA role to this, you're coming from a place that maybe many of your leaders have not come from. You have a different perspective. So you have to speak up. You have to say something. So I think that's one of the differences between an EA, and that is you have more of a responsibility to speak up and say something and talk when you're talking about the business.
Yeah, because like you said, as a chief of staff, and I mean, as an EA, as a force multiplier, you're a goalkeeper. But I feel like when you sort of move into that chief of staff role, you're also a proxy to that
You,
executive or CEO. So they have to trust you to represent them when they're not around, or handle a meeting when they can't come to the meeting, or get all the leadership aligned, right, in order to achieve X. I mean, you're right. It requires that sort of, confidence and being that proxy. So I got a question for you.
okay.
The hardest part, I feel, and I love this because I feel like from your perspective, I want leaders, CEOs, founders out there. What can they do? What can leaders do in order to create that opportunity for their chief of staff to do the things you're saying? Because I feel like that sometimes is the challenge, right? Is not all chief of staffs maybe are part of the leadership team. Maybe they don't have the ability to, have a voice, or, lead or direct the way that a chief of staff can be the most effective. Is there any advice you can give to leaders out there to help their chief of staff grow into that role and be that really that effective force multiplier for them so they can go and be the leader that they want to be, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. The leaders, the founders, you need to bring that chief of staff into the tent. You can't keep things so hush hush or, oh, this is only for for the leadership team. I can only talk to my CFO about this. You have to bring your chief of staff in, because otherwise, if you don't, how can they help you with strategy? How can they keep you in line? And I think sometimes, especially if you come up the way that I did into the role, they still look at you as an executive assistant as part of the rest of the team. Some things that they may have to keep confidential. From the rest of the team, you have to bring this chief of staff in. You have to seek his or her advice. You can't just, again, take it from one side. So you have to bring them in. I was always brought um, in whenever Norman had something to ask us or talk to us about. He brought me in as well. And it was, of course, it helped. It was great for my ego, but it helped him, I believe. And, also, I was going to say this earlier, your chief of staff has equity in the company, whether that's financial or, just in a different sense. They have equity in the company, and they want the company to do well too. They want to continue to get a paycheck. So, just trust that your chief of staff wants you and the company to do well, and you have to bring them in. You have to.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I actually, we did a podcast episode on letting go of control for founders and leaders. And it kind of goes for force multipliers too. But it's so important, the open communication, the outlining what your role is and how you fit into that role and the impact you can make. And I would say like continuous learning, right? It's a journey. And you said it earlier, learning together. That's critical. Growing together. Like when you went to your leader, right, your executive as an EA, you asked for a specific role, and your leader, what I heard is they laid out a plan for you, which I think that's so key. That's so
It is.
key. And we're living in such a digital world. Like education is all over now, it's not hard to get.
Oh yeah, it's much easier, than what I had to do back in the day, and take off work and do all of those things. But yeah, I'm a big believer in training and education, and even and especially in this role, it's just like you gotta stay educated, and there's some groups on LinkedIn that you can join for chiefs of staff. And you learn more about the role and what other chiefs of staffs are doing in their companies. So you have to stay educated. You have to stay sharp. It helps you stay relevant. It helps you to keep up with everything that's going on.
That's so amazing. Are there specific books or podcasts or even just individuals that have been sort of the most impact to you while you were transitioning into your chief of staff role, and something others can, maybe also leverage?
Yeah, there's one that I gotten into recently, the Chief of Staff Roundtable, and
Okay.
they have something, I think about once a month, and they'll have a not necessarily a podcast, it's more like a Zoom call. And they'll have it once a month, and they'll have people come in and talk to the group that are chief of staff at other companies. And there's about 30 people on the call, and it's really very interesting. They even had one where we had to get on there, and they gave us situations. And we went off into another room, and 3 or 4 of us got together and we talked it out, and then and discussed what that situation was, and then had to come back and give a presentation.
It's like a mini
That
MBA.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I was scared to death, but it was interesting, and I think you can learn a lot from it. Um, the other book that I think is very good, and it was about strengths. Now Discover Your Strengths, I think it's called, and it's a little bit off topic, but I think it's a good book to read. One, to discover what your strengths are and to focus on those strengths. Some of us, namely me, tend to focus on the weakness and
Yeah.
fix that. Well, I've learned that that's a little backward. And so it's better for you to focus on that strength and continue to make that better and work in that. I think when we work in our strengths, we are more successful than trying to fix weakness. Of course, you should, fix that. But I think it's more important to work in your strength and go forward in that.
Yeah, no, those are great. Thank you. And let's mention Founder and Force Multiplier too.
I haven't read it yet.
I'm sending it to you, Brenda. I'm sending it to you. You gotta read it. You gotta read it. Actually, I love that you said what you said about, joining a community. I'm so happy to say that the Founder and Force Multiplier, we just put our community in beta testing, but we actually wanted to build a community where founders and force multipliers can be in the same community together, level up together, learn together, take courses together, because it's so important if you have a right hand strategic partner to make sure that your partnership is effective and impactful, right? Like, why else would you have that force multiplier? And as a leader, I will tell you right now, like, so many individuals, founders in startup mode or launching a new product at a company, initiatives, like, it is, you occupy your space, your mind, your tasks, like, you are overly occupied. And that's when you are derailed from, executing on the vision, actually, setting the right metrics to have detective control. So you're not always in fire drill mode, right? Like, a chief of staff is so critical to help maintain, I would say, sanity and business execution.
That is true. That is true. I have learned more about it. And forgive me for not failing to mention, but even the newsletter that Hallie sends out every week, I think that's very important. I like that, the things that she puts into the newsletter are very real life.
Right.
And I love that, and so I love reading it every week. And she also suggests books that she reads. I
She
honestly
reads
am
a lot. I admire her so much. Like, so many books. Like, my heart gets so happy every time she talks about a book. And I'm like, hey, can I get the cliff notes real quick?
she reads so much, and she does her job, and she has her family, so it's just like she proves that it is possible. So
Yeah.
she's a great role model.
Yeah, I do feel that that's something that's so important to really reflect on, because look, our life is so fast paced and busy, and so much is going on, and I had to learn the hard way that it's okay to deprioritize the things that are not in that moment in my life important, or a goal that I'm trying to achieve. And that's a hard, letting go is so hard. It's so hard.
Yeah, it's very difficult. If I have a weakness, I think it would be that. It's very hard for me to delegate, and I've had to learn to do that in my new role. And I've also learned when I've done that, it's just like, oh, that's another great way to do that task.
You
You know,
learn, yes.
you do. And so it's a hard thing, but you finally, learn to pry your fingers away from it and walk away.
Yeah, no, completely, completely. So
Yeah.
in your chief of staff role, right? Or even the EA role, force multiplier role, generally. Um, I talk about this quite a bit. I've read articles about this, like mental fitness and ability to understand human behavior is like it's not a soft skill. It is the skill. Like it is the skill for a force multiplier because you're dealing with multiple executives, maybe multiple, personality types. You have to influence, you have to coach, you have to drive execution. How do you prepare for something like this? And how do you sort of level up your own, I would say, mental fitness to be that force multiplier? Because that is the most difficult, I would say, skill set for a force multiplier or any leader. But generally, force multipliers live in that role, right?
You do, and it's weird. Well, you have to, it's almost like you have multiple personalities. You have to, you speak to this person this way, this one the other way. You're appealing to their personality and um, how you can impress them or be not impactful.
Probably influence them, right?
That's the other I word.
Or help them understand, right? Sometimes it's explaining the why behind why your CEO is doing a certain thing or launching something or changing direction, which is the hardest to do.
And you have to speak to them in a language that they understand and that they appeal to. I think EAs start to do that then. And
Yes.
we learn how to do it, and we learn personalities because we started not just supporting one person, we were supporting multiple managers, and we learn those personalities. We learn what it is that they what they like and what they dislike, and that's you learn then how to speak to to those different managers and to be able to influence them however it is that you need to influence them, whether they need to do a thing or walk away from it. So I think the way that I've always done it, I've just had to, be civil and just talk to people in different personalities. Nobody know who I am anymore.
You know what I call that? I call that being a transformational leader. And that is the term, Brenda, because, and this goes for any person and role out there. I also learned this the hard way, but it is so important. Look, executive presence is important, right? And to have that executive presence, you have to understand when to pull forward, when to pull back, when to speak, when to let others speak, when to let go and see how somebody else sort of puts their thought together, because sometimes you're just kind of like, oh, wow, I would not have done it that way. And this is so much better. Well, there's so many times I've had an aha moment. So many times I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't even think about it that way. What? How? Okay, that's how I'm going to do it from now on.
And you also, when you do that too, you also learn that, oh, okay, that really wasn't the priority that I thought it was. It wasn't that important, and I found myself stressing over something that wasn't a big deal at all. So yeah, stepping back is a good strategy as well.
It is, right? It is. If you were to talk about the most challenging part about being a force multiplier, what is it in your experience? And how did you overcome it? I know I get a little deep in my feelings.
Oh my gosh. Now you've stumped me. Um, I think probably the hardest part, I think the hardest part for me is going back to the strategy and the KPI. Um, I had a bit of a different opinion about a certain strategy and really didn't think, and I can't get into the detail of it, but I didn't think that that was a strategy. I thought, well, this is just what we do, you
Yeah.
know, that's your job. And I didn't say anything. And I should have, but I didn't say anything because I was feeling a bit small at the time because everybody in the room thought it was a strategic thing
Yeah.
except me. And so I didn't say anything. And I learned later that it truly was something strategic. And once I started to see it unfold and see what my manager was talking about, I was like, oh, okay. Um, I have to say that the one thing I learned from it, or one of the things I learned from it, was always speak up. Because I think if I had said something, even being the only person that didn't agree, it could have been explained to me at that time what it was all about instead of me leaving the room going, oh God, that is so stupid. I wouldn't have done that. Blah, 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 blah. So if I had spoke up and said something, it would have been explained to me, and I would have learned immediately what my CEO was talking about. So I've learned since then to always say something, always, even if you and I've spoken up since then, and they've explained it, and I'm like, oh, okay. Or I've spoken up, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, that's a good point. So I've learned from that to speak up. So the KPIs and strategies are difficult for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I feel like, at the end of the day, it's also the atmosphere and culture. It is so important for small businesses, large businesses. It doesn't change. Like having the culture to allow for individuals to speak their mind, to provide different perspectives is so important. And
It is.
I remember there have been times where even in my roles, even with an MBA, okay, like if you have this fear of speaking up because the culture doesn't allow it, that's a problem. And anybody today needs to really reflect on that. And I think it is such an important question to pose in like employee engagement surveys. So important because the ability, it just creates your company will just run better.
It will. And even though I thought that KPI or that strategic item, I still had the opportunity to speak. They've never, it never said,
Exactly.
well,
Yeah, which is great.
they never treated me that way. But it was all in here.
Yeah.
And and there was no reason for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you got to get out of your own head, right?
Do.
So how do you build, like, that's a very difficult, I would say development area for a lot of individuals, right? Is building confidence and building enough confidence to, provide a varying perspective. And I feel like as a force multiplier, that's the reason you get hired, right? Like I know when I was a force multiplier, when I had a force multiplier myself, like my favorite part was challenging me because I was like, yeah, you're right. You're right. I should not be doing it that way. Thank you for your perspective. You just saved me 6 months of agony and pain because by the time I would have found out, we would have been crashing and burning. But it isn't easy. It isn't easy to build confidence, right? Do you have any advice around that?
I do. My confidence, I believe, came from working with my mentor. I have a couple of mentors in my life, and and it's just from talking to them. one always says, Brenda, you know better. And I've always kept that in my head. And I think talking to them and and then doing that thing or it has helped me, and then just the constant practice, again, we'll stick with speaking up, that helps build your confidence as well. So I'd say having a mentor is very important, is very helpful. You have to have that. And just to find out, am I, crazy in thinking this way? So I think a mentor is helpful.
I agree. And I also feel like sometimes maybe having a person in your life that's a truth teller, you know,
Yes.
because
Yes.
there are, and you don't have to sometimes go far. That could be like a parent, a sibling, a college friend, like somebody that's just going to always lay it out real to you. I feel like that real perspective is so important sometimes.
It is, and your mentor should be a truth teller. I mean,
True.
you don't, and when you're looking for that one, don't just pick somebody who thinks, oh, you're great and you're terrific. You want that, but you also want somebody that's gonna tell you the truth and be very upfront with you and tell you, that's really not a good idea. You may want to look at that a different way. So, absolutely, you do want a truth teller.
Right. So tell us, Brenda, what is something people don't really know about you?
Oh God.
Or what
Um,
are they surprised to find out about you?
I don't want to tell them. Um,
Well, don't tell us that. Tell us something else then.
the is a couple of things. One, I watch way too much television, way too much. But I enjoy it. I love watching classic movies. The older, the better. You see, I have a bunch of
I
old
see.
movies.
You also
Uh,
dropped a year
that-
for me, and I love that. You were like, you have to watch movies from
oh,
1939. I'm like, oh, it's
39.
very specific. Okay.
Yeah. Nin- 1939 was like the golden year in classic movies, so you have to watch it. So, like uh, Gone with the Wind and Wizard of Oz, movies like that. You have to watch those, and I know they can be a little weird in our today time, but just go past it, and I enjoy them, and it's really good for my mental health. I think it just kind of is fantasy for me,
Yeah.
and even more so than movies today. And I just love it. Watching Pride and Prejudice, and these people live in this huge house, and they wear these great gowns, but they're poor. So, it's just kind of fun to watch. And they're nervous about being put out of their home. So it's just a little different, and I love doing that. I'm a great cook. I love to cook, and I'm good at it. So
Yeah.
those are a few things that people don't know about me, I don't think.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it's so important to like touch base with the things that make you happy, the things that help you be creative. I also love to cook. And it's funny because I don't have that much time to cook, but I just feel like being, with my hands, putting flavors together, to me it's a form of art,
Exactly.
right? And you actually were in the food industry too as chief of staff. So you've been around, that whole servicing industry and what it means. And, I mean, Gordon Ramsay, like, come on, like, you're a great chef. So
Yeah, food is one of my passions, outside of, being an administrative professional. I love food, all things food, and it's really a fun thing to me, a fun thing for me. When I cook a lot of times, and especially if I've had a bad day, it helps me to decompress.
right.
And I get all of that. I get all of it out, and I get to focus on something else, on how to create. something, and by the time I'm finished making the meal, I feel much better.
Yeah. That's your outlet.
It is my outlet, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's so important to have outlets.
Mhm.
We have, I think, the pandemic has taught us that at the end of the day, we are human. We have
Absolutely.
feelings. We can't
Yeah,
ignore them. You can ignore them for a while, but there comes a point where you will crash, burn out, anxiety. There's a lot of things that come with it, right? And I think that's having an outlet is so important, especially when you have maybe an intense career or you're, always go, 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 pulling back, so critical.
it is critical. I wish my outlet was, running, but but no.
Hey, it's funny because there are individuals that, they're like, oh, going to restaurants, like who does that anymore? And I'm like, well, I do. I love it. I love restaurant. Like maybe that's my toxic trait. I love to go out and eat. I love it. And I can go without buying a lot of things, but going out to eat is one thing I can just have a hard time budgeting. I would just say Brussels sprouts never come out good at home. Period. I've yet to find somebody to make me Brussels sprouts like the restaurants. I'm coming over. So Brenda, as we wrap up here, what advice would you give Force Multipliers out there? What is your Brenda Rogers perspective to them to help them in their career goals?
Um, I I think you need to continue training. That's always my thing. You have to keep training. You have to have a community, a network. You always have to do that, whether, you get it from Founder and Force Multiplier or from Hallie's uh, uh,
Newsletter, yeah.
newsletter. I can't get my words out. Newsletter, or you get it from even other assistants that work in your company. You have to have that network. And the third thing is, just have belief in yourself. You know better. You know better, as my mentor says to me. And you've been in this job or this position for however many years, and you know what to do. Don't underestimate yourself. So, get training, stay in contact with your community, and believe in yourself. Trust yourself.
Love everything. You are so inspirational, Brenda. I am so excited to find out that we live in the same zip code. What are the odds? What a small world. You're just such an inspiration. And I want to say that I don't know if you have been told this, but your calming demeanor is just so beautiful to me. Like,
Oh,
I gravitate towards it. You make me happy. I smile every time I'm with you. And I don't know if anyone's told you, but like, that is a strength. That is a strength. And I want you to own it because you put a smile on my face. I know you put a smile on others' face, and I can just see why you're such a great force multiplier, especially in times of chaos. I want you to be around me when I have chaos around me because I feel like you're like calming water.
And it's so funny you mentioned that because I think that's something I've always had. And, I've been, in legal and, things would kind of blow up and everybody was running around and I was like, okay. And, let's
Great
take
quality.
time. And I never even knew that I had that. So thank you.
You're welcome. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Brenda, for being here today. It has been a super inspirational interview. Force multipliers out there, I know, are going to not only take your words and apply them, but I feel like founders and leaders out there hearing perspectives, and the voice of a force multiplier helps them understand what to do with their strategic partners. It has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for tuning into our podcast. If you love the show, please leave us a review. It really helps us get the podcast out to the leaders and force multipliers who need it. As you know, we love to share in experiences and grow together. If you are interested in coming on to our podcast or have a guest referral, please email us at info@founderandforcemultiplier.com, and all the information to reach us is linked below in the show notes. Thank you again, and see you next week.